So welcome to another piano thing, and I'd just like to say why I think that the best two the Beethoven sonatas to start with are the Moonlight Sonata and the Pathetique Sonata. And it's primarily because the Moonlight Sonata is easy. The first movement is easy anyway, and even the third movement is easy to do at a slow speed. And the middle movement is easy as well, compared to the other sonatas. Really, I think it's the easiest. Well, there are two other ones which are called light sonatas, which Beethoven didn't want included in his 32 sonatas. But so apart from those two light sonatas, this is, I would say, the easiest sonata, the Moonlight Sonata. So it's a good one to start with. But it's, to be honest, not the best one. When the pianist, if he or she has begun with that sonata, gets more experienced, it becomes a little bit, boring. So a really good one to have as to play in juxtaposition to that Moonlight Sonata is the Pathetique, and so that would take, I'd say, about 10 years of playing the Moonlight Sonata to be able to begin the Pathetique, the reason that I would juxtapose these two sonatas is because although they're both in the minor key, C minor and C sharp minor, with an A flat major middle section in the Pathetique, and I think D flat major in the Moonlight, so that's sort of they're similar in key, but yet they are very different in other ways. So, for example, if we're thinking about the way it ends, you do the Pathetique first, of course. The Pathetique ends with a rather loud chord on C minor, same chord with which it begins. That can be followed nicely by the C sharp minor Moonlight. So just do it again. So it ends. Yeah, so it ends on that. Exactly the same chord that the whole sonata begins, by the way. And then Moonlight will begin like this, with the soft pedal down. Now keep this also soft. So it follows nicely because of the loudness of the final chord of the Pathetique and that soft opening of the Moonlight. So there's a good contrast there. And as Horowitz has said, the main thing to bring out in your piano playing is the contrasts. So Horowitz was asked how what the main thing to concentrate on was in piano playing, and he said that it was mainly the contrast, to bring out that the contrasts within a piece. And I think he would have said, and the contrast between the next piece, which you're going to play after another piece, of course. So that works well, but also some other contrasts. So if we think about the Pathetique Sonata, it's definitely It's very obviously an early Beethoven sonata, although very original and very revolutionary. Yet it's also quite obviously an early sonata. It's from his early period. The Moonlight Sonata is it's right on the cusp, really, between the early and the middle period. So it's not so definitely an early sonata, really. It's already that the opening, is that soft andante, adagio sostenuto opening, and then that the third movement, which is so sort of violent and revolutionary, I would say, and separated by that little one page of music for the middle movement. I would say it's not so much an early sonata as a transitional sonata. Some people even call it a middle. It's sort of it's like a middle period Beethoven sonata in a way. The third movement, anyway, and the first movement, in a way. So there's the contrast between the. If we think about the movements, what's the big movement in the Pathetique sonata? It's obviously the first movement. Yeah. This. And so forth, and all this. A magnificent first movement, but that's definitely the biggest movement of those three movements. And in contrast, the Moonlight Sonata, the big movement is the final movement. In the Pathetique, the final movement is the smallest of all the movements, really, in significance, I would say. Whereas in the Moonlight, it's the other way around. That's another big contrast between these two sonatas. And now, talking about the second movement of these two sonatas, we have the most beautiful second movement, perhaps, of all the sonatas that Beethoven wrote. I mean, also the Tempest and the final sonata and the final three sonatas, or the final sonata and also the sonata number 30, have particularly beautiful middle movements, but this Pathetique is one of his most beautiful movements. Yeah, this one here. And in contrast to that, the next sonata, if you do these two sonatas together, the next sonata, you'd want to change that. You want to make that contrast again that Horowitz is speaking of. So, and I'm talking about the contrast between the sonatas. So you want to be thinking about how this is different to the Pathetique. So this is the Moonlight Sonata, second movement. It's just light. There's nothing at all deep about it. Whether there is a lot of depth, I think, in this second movement of the first sonata, of the Pathetique sonata, whereas this even a quite rustic feel, like a country farmer's dance here. the whole atmosphere of this second movement is diametrically opposed really to the second movement of the Pathetique, and so that works well. You don't have two sonatas which are really in any way similar. So the first movements of each of these sonatas, Pathetique and Moonlight, are completely different, and the second movement is completely different, and then the third movement is completely different, because, as I said, the third movement of the Pathetique is the classical sounding and light. It's a light movement, and whereas the final movement of the Moonlight is a mammoth kind of movement. It's a very big, explosive. It's the biggest of the movements. So for these reasons I've given, it's really good to have the Pathetique counterbalanced with the Moonlight Sonata. And you can see actually someone do this on YouTube. It's Mikhail Pletnyov. He does a concert, so in his concert, and he does the concert, starts it, he opens it with the first sonata, which is a great sonata, of course, in F minor, and then followed by the Pathetique, and then followed by the Moonlight. So he's done the Pathetique and the Moonlight, like I suggest, and then he continues with the Tempest sonata, and I think that's it. Yeah. But anyway, these two for a beginner would be two really good Beethoven sonatas to begin with.